So yes, bonus Doctor Who viewage on a Sunday night. Back to school tomorrow, sadly. Boo. So I've worked very hard to keep the cliffhanger of this episode away from Lib, because back in the day, as far as I recall, there was no pre-publicity about that moment. And we see, if you'll excuse my French, the return of the cyber fuckers, the cyber bastards. And so, cliffhanger aside, there's a really, really good episode of Doctor Who. So, this is the most solid the whole soap opera thing has felt. I really think this episode benefits from having had Black Orchid before it, because I care about this Doctor now. All of a sudden, I've seen him having fun. He seems quite joyous at the start. And for as much as I'm obviously going to side with the Doctor, I can appreciate where Adric's coming from. He is whingy. He's a teenage boy. But nonetheless, I think there's a valid argument there. I like the fact that Nista and Tegan are caught in the middle of it, and they're doing the best to smooth all that over. And that worked. That worked for me. The unrelentingly grim atmosphere and the how many deaths have we had? That's probably more deaths.
8, I think.
8. So that's probably more deaths in this one episode of Doctor Who than in the entirety of Davison's run so far, I would say. Castrovalva notwithstanding, because even though those people in that were fictional, we still feel we feel their loss. So, with the exception of Castrovalva, I reckon.
How many stories has it been?
So we've had 4 to Doomsday, Kinder, Visitation, Black Orchid, and then we've just had 8 deaths. So talk about ramping up the grimness. That is heavy duty stuff. But nonetheless, even Grumpy Sergeant can completely see where they're coming from, and it earns that sort of tension, doesn't it? They weren't cheap deaths either. Yes, I know it leans very heavily into sci-fi horror tropes and all that. The other thing I think is noticeable is I feel keenly, after whinging about it, that the whole aspect of this Doctor, which is a reasonable man thrown into unreasonable situations, I think that's a legit take on this Doctor. It's totally come through here. Like, he's pottering about, talking about dinosaurs, having a lovely time, and then mean people come and are unduly nasty to him. He tries, and even though there's, he says, "Oh, I'm not allowed to mess about," whatever, the Doctor seriously tries to get this on a civilised footing by saying, "Hello, I'm the Doctor." Totally lovely. So I can get that with Davison's Doctor now. I wonder if it's just taken having had sort of the textures of the previous stories. I think 4 to Doomsday aside, and the Visitation, even with the Visitation factored into it, there's just been we've seen this new Doctor in different circumstances, and now we've got to a point where, and this does feel, apart from the grimness being ramped up to 10, this does feel a very Doctor Who type Doctor Who story. This could be you could have had this in a Hinchcliffe era easily, with a bit of tweaking. This could be a Pertwee story. It's not a base under siege, obviously, but it obviously leans into that. So Davison now being thrown into this context and being a very Davison-y Doctor, that's working very well for me. Yes, I will say, I have enjoyed this episode of Doctor Who, and most of all, I enjoyed the look on my wife's face when the Cybermen turned up at the end and she looked genuinely shocked, and now she's asleep. It took 4 minutes and 5 seconds of me talking. I'm going to put everybody to bed, make some sandwiches for tomorrow, and off we go again.